Brought to you by the community of certified B corporations.
Thank you for this opportunity to think out loud with all of you in my treasured B Corp community. I appreciate how serious and fun and constructive you always are on this journey. And today I'm lucky to get to spin out how we might keep what William Faulkner described as the old verities and truths of the heart: love and honor and pity and pride and compassion and sacrifice at the core of our work, our companies, and our development path. How to keep affection in business for good. My name is Kat Taylor. I am CEO of Beneficial State Bank, a triple bottom line institution creating social justice and environmental well-being at the same time that we're financially sustainable. And we even put the B right into our logo. I want to start by calling out the beliefs that we base the bank on. And they should sound familiar to everybody. They're nothing new, but they're so important. We believe in the promise of every person that we can do better together than we will ever do apart. And then no woman is an island either. In Wendell Berry's words, we do not have to act as if we are alone. In fact, we must not act as if we are alone, although sometimes it's important for the philosopher kings to get to be so. As recently Nick Kristof, in his new book, A Path Appears, reminded me, quote, John Rawls, the brilliant 20th century philosopher, argued compellingly for judging a society's fairness by considering it from behind a veil of ignorance, meaning we don't know whether we'll be born in that society to an investment banker or a teenage mom in a leafy suburb or a gang-ridden city, healthy or disabled, smart or struggling, privileged or disadvantaged. We take our rules at Beneficial State Bank, we make our rules at Beneficial State Bank from a Rawlsian point of view. As tempting as it is to recite the litany of abuses, risks, and other side effects of industrialization, we have got always to move towards something positive as opposed to away from something bad. We put honey on all our books. We make sure cathedrals reach the sky for all people. We start copious batches of stone soup, and we create the right conditions for good people to make good choices. 7 to 9 billion people are a source of strength, not just a strain on ecological limits. We always think of the system effect that we desire to achieve and solve for design, scale, migration, and transformation. This is my idea of clarity and focus. Beneficial State Bank recognizes the importance of banking even as it departs intentionally from banking as we have known it. It's a work in progress, but the bank does preserve the leverage, self-discipline, and recycling that makes banking the main way that we amplify and facilitate commerce. And I want to take a minute here just to go through a couple of features of the bank that are departures from banking that preserve the affection in our business. First, we changed the ownership structure of the bank. 100% of the economic rights of our bank are owned by our foundation. That means that any profits, any and all profits when distributed, have to go back to the low-income communities that we serve and the environment upon which we depend. Virtuous cycle. That's a virtuous cycle of reinvestment of profits. It's also protection from a private shareholder, that force that Milton Friedman thinks should be insisting that we maximize profit, which usually comes at the expense of our other bottom lines. We also have created and pursue a lending practice that is measurable and focused on the new areas of our new economy that are producing social justice and environmental well-being. At all times, we have to have at least 75% of our loan dollars outstanding in the hands of transformative actors producing affordable housing, renewable energy, sustainable food, women and minority-owned businesses, nonprofits, et cetera. And the other 25%, we work really hard for that not to be doing something contra our mission. Soon we're adding metrics of outcome, so we'll be able to report renewable kilowatts financed or living wage jobs produced. Both of those are important to us. Eventually, what we need to see is if we've had an effect on the banking system that we would like to see. Our goal, even as a small organization, is to constantly migrate capital to this beneficial banking model, and that capital takes the form of equity capital, deposit capital, non-interest income, and human capital, most importantly. We host 10 interns every summer and hope that they stay in the practice of beneficial banking with us. But our ultimate goal is to transform the industry. From the third worst in the most recent Gallup poll, banking is rated by popularity only above oil and gas and the federal government, to among the top, even though bank is still a four-letter word. We need to make sure that all of us understand the power of leveraged finance. Coal without coal finance is not nearly as threatening, and we need to use that leveraged power wisely. Along the way, we are going to face setbacks. It's going to be messy. If this looks like a clean diagram, then we're not heading anywhere but messiness. But we do this together with love and a lot of fun. Choose your partners carefully. We are humbled but not hamstrung by the dimension of our objectives given our tininess. I want to give you the context of scale. First, Beneficial State Bank is about $500 million in assets. That seemed like a whopping number to me. But we are essentially a single honeybee. By comparison, the Veterans Administration, which is laboring to produce the services that our veterans need so desperately, is a massive organization at $69 billion in assets. That's the bird on the bison. That's a water buffalo too, whoopsie. That was meant to be a bison. By comparison to the Veterans Administration, Bank of a Million, Freudian slips. Bank of America is now $2 trillion in assets. It is the water buffalo, or the bison, and Bank of America is just one of 6,000 American banks. We are a tiny honeybee up against a herd of behemoths. However, we don't despair at that, because at our hand have we the strategies of David and Goliath and the Trojan horse. And I am reminded of a gentleman who was recently featured in the New York Times, and I'm sorry I don't remember his name, but he was Gandhi-like to me. He said, "No work is futile if it is in support of what you truly believe." So I want to spend the rest of my time issuing some challenges to ourself at Beneficial State Corporation and Beneficial State Bank and the B Corporation movement. As Bart and others have been exhorting us, let's adopt a wholesale approach to expanding the impact of the B assessment through our supply chains, the procurement rubrics of the MUSHs, that's municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals, and prisons, and the insurance regime. Let's embark on that network of networks that Chad showed us could be so powerful for us. Let's be assiduously honest about our results. Let's track the correlation of financial return, credit worthiness, human capital attraction to B Corp ratings, and see if we can't lower the cost of capital for highly assessed B Corps. How do we view the change at the firm, sector, industry, economy, and societal levels if we don't measure it and make it matter? Let's show the rating agencies, that would be S&P and those guys, that B Analytics is a much better risk assessment system to inform their ratings, assess their risk, provide the appropriate level of capital and insurance, but mostly, and most importantly, to eliminate corporate behaviors that should not and never will be insured against. Let's take advantage and connect with what Paul Hawken calls the Blessed Unrest, that movement of movements, recognizing that it will be extremely hard to predict how it all comes together. According to the great evolutionary biologist Buzz Hollings, we will be experiencing, as has been true for millennia, fast change grabbing onto slow change loops and transforming whole ecosystems. If slow change is the arduous process of signing up the next, and then the next, and then the next B Corp, the fast change of consumer alignment demands, of supply chain risk outcomes, of global rule changes like a price on carbon could be right around the corner. Let's be ready for that. Let's embrace scale. In food and finance, where I live, that had become a dirty word, but we can find creative ways to keep our responsiveness and its flip side, accountability, even as we grow to meet the economics of our business and the demands of competition. Let's figure out what the B Corp model of development is, not just the model of companies and community, and this might be the most important one for me. How can we explicitly address racial, economic, gender, and generational equity in our development model and all manifestations of it? As Angela Glover Blackwell challenges us, how might we pursue a development model based on equity? This is a promise long delayed, but let us not allow it to be denied. And I'll just close by quoting William Faulkner, who upon receiving the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1950, among other things, told us what was required of the writer of consequence. Quote, "He must learn the rules again. He must teach himself that the basest of all things is to be afraid, and teaching himself that, forget it forever, leaving no room in his workshop for anything but the old verities and truths of the heart, the old universal truths lacking which any story is ephemeral and doomed, love and honor and pity and pride and compassion and sacrifice. Until he does so, he labors under a curse. He writes not of love, but of lust, of defeats in which nobody loses anything of value, of victories without hope, and worst of all, without pity or compassion. His griefs grieve on no universal bones, leaving no scars. He writes not of the heart, but of the glands. Until he relearns these things, he will write as though he stood among and watched the end of man. I decline to accept the end of man." Thank you very much.
Be the change.